Welcome back, YouTube. Today we're going to be taking a deeper dive into looking at refeeds, cheat meals, and diet breaks to help you understand some of the best practices on when it's appropriate to use these tools and how to go about implementing them. Let's go. Now, before we get into the actual content, I'm curious as to how many of you guys use refeeds, cheat meals, or diet breaks when you're going through a cutting phase. I know a lot of people commonly do a cheat meal maybe once a week. And if you do you track this, or do you give yourself the freedom to eat whatever it is that you want? Leave a comment below and let me know. So when we're looking at all these different methods, they're simply different ways to improve the most important variable when it comes to long-term success and creating an impactful change in your life, and that's adherence. The person who's able to stick to the plan with the highest degree of consistency will always win out over the one who can't. Generally speaking, you would be utilizing refeeds, cheat meals, and diet breaks through a period of prolonged dieting to give either a psychological or a physiological break from the dieting process. So the question as to when to use either one of these really comes down to what we're trying to go for here. A psychological break is exactly as it sounds, giving somebody a free pass to stray from their consistent routine to help them mentally stay on track long term. A cheat meal or a free meal is a typical strategy that we're looking at here. A physiological break is more to do with the adaptations that occur due to being in a calorie deficit for a long period of time. For short-term adaptations, such as a decrease in glycogen storage in the muscle and overall energy levels, we'd be looking more at refeeds or high calorie days. Whereas if we're looking at improving some of the more chronic metabolic adaptations that occur, such as decreases in subconscious activity levels and a slight decreases in metabolic rates and any nutrient deficiencies that may occur from the dieting process, we'd be looking more at diet breaks. So we're going to take a look at each one of these things individually. A cheat meal is simply a strategy where you'd select a meal to be completely untracked and in most cases, but not always, would allow for a larger amount of calories. This might be something where a person is craving a particular food such as a burger or pizza, which normally can't fit into their dieting plan due to its overall setup, or it might be to accommodate for a social event such as a birthday or a family event. Of course, it would be better off to try and account for this meal and work out how to fit it into your intake. But maybe the person isn't experienced enough to do this, or they don't have the macronutrient allowances to do so, or they simply want to be able to eat and mentally switch off from the tracking process. All of these are pretty valid reasons altogether. Generally speaking though, I don't utilize this strategy that often, simply because you'll quickly start to realize that it's usually not too challenging to fit in any of these typical craving foods that you might have into your diet the vast majority of the time. A simple way to look at this is to compare it to your finances. Hopefully you wouldn't cheat on your finances and go on these untracked spending splurges as a reward to yourself for sticking to your budget for the rest of your week. So why would you do that with your nutrition? From a metabolic health standpoint, one meal isn't really going to do a great deal. It might top up depleted intramuscular glycogen stores a little bit, and it might give you a very transient boost in energy, but more than anything else, the real reason behind this would be the mental break. Just keep in mind that doing this in an untracked fashion can very easily put you out of a calorie deficit for the week, and that is why progress may stall out if you keep these untracked cheat meals in over a long period of time. So next, let's take a look at some of the strategies that will create more of a change from a metabolic standpoint. And this is where we're going to be looking at refeeds and diet breaks. So 3 things that happen over a prolonged period of being in a calorie deficit are: 1, you start to deplete stored muscle glycogen, which can have a direct impact on overall performance in the gym and may threaten loss of muscle mass. 2, you'll see a decrease in your basal metabolic rate over time. And 3, unless if you keep a really close eye on it, you typically see a decrease in what's called non-exercise activity thermogenesis, or the amount that you move on a subconscious level. We tend to deplete stored muscle glycogen simply because of the decreased availability of fuel from less calories. We see decreases in basal metabolic rate due to the fact that you typically see decreases in body fat and body weight through a deficit period. You wouldn't expect a 100 kilo person to have the same metabolic rate as a 50 kilo person, and decreases to your basal metabolic rate as you drop weight are simply a reflection of this. It's completely normal, and it isn't because you have metabolic damage or anything like that. It's simply because you now occupy less space and require less energy to fuel your day-to-day functions. The one that we do really care about a lot though is a subconscious decreases to NEAT, or the amount of energy your body expends outside of structured, programmed training. Because when you take both the reduction in NEAT and the reduction in basal metabolic rate together, it can start to create problems in an individual's ability to sustain a deficit through the dieting process, and it also may start to create problems in your ability to ingest sufficient amounts of micronutrients due to the less volume of food coming in altogether by being, at a lowered calorie intake. And this is where I'd look to integrate a refeed or potentially a diet break to mitigate these effects. A refeed would be where I spend between 2 to 4 days at a higher calorie intake, generally coming from carbohydrates. I usually program for an extra 10 to 40% of calories coming from carbohydrates on these days, though you can always go a little bit higher. It really depends on the individual and their response, which is where experience plays a humongous part in all of this. I usually opt to space the refeed out across 2 to 4 days as opposed to doing it all in one day to allow sufficient time for glycogen restoration and to ease digestive load. I've always found, from both a bodybuilding and a general energy perspective, loading everything into 1 or even 2 days usually doesn't give the desired effect that I want. Being only 2 to 4 days, there isn't really enough time here to create changes in your metabolic rate or NEAT levels long term, but it is sufficient to restock glycogen levels and to improve your mood and appetite so the person can continue training consistently at a high level. It also does offer this psychological break similar to a cheat meal and affords more calories which can be put towards more of these cheat-based meals. Now finally we have the diet break, and this is where instead of a 2 to 4 day refeed, you typically spend around 2 to 3 week period at a higher calorie intake. I normally recommend going straight back up to maintenance intake overnight, or maybe even going slightly above by about 5 to 10%. The longer duration of this diet break allows sufficient time to restore some of the metabolic adaptations that may have occurred to your NEAT and your metabolic rate over time. Keep in mind that it should also see an increase in body weight and potentially a slight increase in body fat. It probably won't unless you've gone completely overboard in the calories for this period, but don't be surprised if it does occur. You're eating more calories. Some of those calories are going to go to fat stores. This is all about setting you up to be able to continue on with your calorie deficit long term. Once you finish the diet break, you can choose to go back down to the deficit you were on prior to the diet break immediately, or you can create a smaller deficit from your current intake. So if you started the deficits of say 1500 calories and you went back up to 2200 calories for your diet break, you could go straight back down to 1500, or you could do a smaller step down to say 2000 instead. The choice is yours, and again, this is something that boils down to experience more than anything else in making the right choice. So there you go guys, a concise guide to cheat meals, refeeds, and diet breaks. I hope you guys found this useful, and please don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button, and I'll see you guys next time.